So whenever you are taking over a new team, there are a lot of different moves that you can make to start to lay a foundation for your team's culture. There are a lot of things you can do, but there's only so much that you can do. Time is a factor. So where do you begin? Well, today's guest, McKenzie Ridgely, has a pretty good blueprint for a lot of coaches out there that she's going to share with you. First off, just a little bit about McKenzie. She is a very, very, very special guest. I first received an email from her in September of 2023, and she told me that she was a field hockey coach of an under 14s team in Maryland, and she'd become a huge fan of the podcast, the Coaching Culture Podcast. She's read the articles and the books, and through, that following TOC and coaching culture, in that process, she discovered a love of coaching, culture, and leadership. Best of all, she wanted a job for TOC. And of course, I hired her. And for the last 2 years, she's been the one making it all happen here at TOC, editing the podcast, writing up coaching notes, getting the newsletter out. And she also presented alongside me in our Foundations of Coaching online course. She's also an active member and mentor in TOC Coach Community, where you can interact with her there. And I have to mention this too, because this is part of the big part of her story that we're going to be discussing today. She recently had her first season as a varsity head coach in Maryland, and she happened to win the state championship. Yes, you heard that right. She won the state championship in her first year. Now, she applied the culture system framework that in a way that, is very doable for most coaches out there. And she's going to share that with you today. I'll let her tell you the rest of the story in the next 2 episodes of the Coaching Culture Podcast. So welcome back. My name is JP Nurbin, and I'm joined by my co-host Nate Sanderson, along with McKenzie. As always, the mission of this podcast is to help you to become a better leader and build a better team culture. To get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, you can subscribe at tocculture.com or by using the link in the details of this episode. You can also learn more about TOC Coach, which can help you to reshape your leadership and your team's culture. And whether you're a youth coach like McKenzie, or a high school coach like McKenzie, or a college Division I coach like our last guest in the podcast, Angel Underkin, TOC Coach will provide you with online courses, resources, community, and coaching. We've got 3 tiers. Our standard tiers, it's completely free at the moment. It gets you access to our community chat. Our premium tier gives you access to all our online courses, a transformational coach and culture certification, the resources, live webinars, and a free one-to-one coaching call with a TOC executive coach. For administrators, if you're an administrator out there or you want to bring it to all the coaches in your organization, we have a VIP tier, which gives schools and clubs access for every coach, premium access within your organization, as well as we've had additional courses and trainings for administrators. Learn more at tocculture.com.
Well, McKenzie, welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast here. Of course, you are the longtime editor and the brilliance behind the scenes that makes this thing possible for JP and Betsy and I and our many guests. And now we're excited to bring you out into a conversation here with our audience, following up on your first season as a varsity head coach and a state championship season. So what we're going to try to do here today, McKenzie, you and I had the good fortune of being able to kind of talk together throughout the season for a series of webinars that we did in the TOC community. And so I kind of want to start a little bit with just the systems that we tried to implement, that you implemented this year with your team, from the culture system and a lot of JP's work. And I think we'll get started here with just before we even get into the season. Your first time head coach, you've been an assistant for a couple of years in the same program. Overall, just what were you kind of thinking as you were getting ready to get started this season?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank Nate for taking me through those, what's like 6 or 7 episodes inside the community. Super, super helpful to have somebody to bounce those ideas off of and ask questions and figure out the ins and outs of, actually implementing those systems. It's one thing to want to do it. Second thing to actually do it. And then third to do it decent. And lots of credit to you there to help me talk through it and the nuances of, every team is a little bit different. But yeah, so I helped out last year with the program, took over, and I knew that, obviously being with TOC for a little over 2 years now, there's all of these great resources inside. And I'm like, okay, what can I realistically do in my first year? And what do I know will have the biggest impact? And having that as a baseline was like, okay, I know that like more work on the front end is going to be better than, trying to play catch up throughout the season. And so lots of things like, we talked about the very first thing I did was like, a parent meeting and a captain's council. We voted on our captains. So just doing that work on the front end, I knew was going to be huge.
Let me ask you real quick on that, McKenzie. So you're obviously like, I got to get upstream, right? You know enough, like,
yeah,
I don't want to just jump into this, right? So when you think about putting together that, because you've been exposed to all these resources, you've been hitting the podcast, you've been on some of the courses and all that stuff there. So how was that process of like, okay, but this is what I have to do? Like, how did you whittle down from all the things I could do to what is going to actually work for this team?
I think that, I have experience coaching club. And so I knew a little bit about, what kind of expectations to set throughout the season. But being with a high school team, I coach a younger club team. And so I never coached like this age group really for varsity high school, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And then, their parents that come along with it. And there's such different, like varying levels of competitiveness and talent and all of that stuff. So I think just like, I knew that whatever I could do to like get all of us on the same page as far as like expectations and being with the team last year, it was kind of wishy-washy in terms of like what we can expect from certain players and other players and, what the coaches, parents can expect from me, what the players can expect from me. And so I knew that I had to kind of lay all of that out. I created like a huge Google folder of those things. And like it really started with me ironing out, okay, like what are my non-negotiables? What are my, expectations for the girls as far as responsibilities, as far as, communication? What are my like for the parents? Like I had a little bit of background in terms of like what I know works good for me coming from club. So I kind of applied those things first. And then maybe modified a few as far as, coaching high school. You see these kids basically every day. You spend a lot more time with them and their parents. So I think
what was the hardest part about whittling that down though for you? Like, as you're kind of getting into it, it's like you could, so you start with what's most important to me. And is that like where it began?
Yeah, that's where, because you can't really like present anything to the parents without being like, here's what I know, here's what I'm going to commit to for the season. As far as like my parent meeting, I knew that was coming up quickly as soon as we kind of got the team set. But like I can't go in front of the parents and I didn't want to just say, okay, here's when we're going to practice, here's what we're going to do, like da da da. Like I wanted to be able to tell them like, this is the, framework that I'm following. This is what I want the girls to come out of the season with. And here's how I'm, going to do it. Here are my non-negotiables. Here's the way I expect you to communicate with me. Here's the way you can expect me to communicate with you. And that helped kind of set a foundation. But I knew that as far as the team organizing like the leadership council and the captains were going to be a huge part of the season. And as far as, the leaders leading us in the right direction too. So I know those two things I really wanted to get right.
Well, Mackenzie, we'll kind of walk through this a little bit chronologically. And you've already mentioned, one of the first things that we had a conversation about was the parent meeting, because that precedes, the start of practice and electing captains and role conversations. You do get an opportunity, really, especially as a first year coach, to start with a blank slate, and that's a little bit different than your second year where everybody's got some experience with you. When you look back on the season and you think about what you shared in your parent meeting, what do you think are the two or three most important or impactful things or significant things that you really accomplished in that parent meeting before the season even started?
Yeah, I think what, I feel like I was, watching all of the parents as, as I'm presenting, and a few things that I feel like everyone was kind of like, oh, okay. That, they were impressed by it, I guess, was like I laid out my coaching values and my coaching non-negotiables, my four core coaching values, and then, things that I'm really not going to accept, or just things that like I need in order to bring myself to practice every day. And people are like, okay, that's pretty clear and like pretty on par with what we know about you, McKenzie. So like we're excited about that. And I just kind of laid out like goals that I had for the girls for the season that really didn't have anything to do with, wins, losses, championships, anything like that. They were all like very process driven goals. I knew that like I don't know if I fully expected the success that we had for the season. I knew that, we had a really good team. We had a good, really great opportunity as far as, talent on the team to make the most of it. But those moments, and then the other thing I did was I had all of the like seniors get up and introduce themselves, and like, I kind of sprung it on them last minute to make it really genuine, but just what their goals were for the season, and just how excited they are, and just getting excited for the season. And so I think the parents really enjoyed that too.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea to incorporate players into the parent meeting. I know, some of the coaches that we've worked with, JP, that have used captains or returning captains to talk about the values or to talk about the standards, so that it's not just coming from the coach, especially when you've had, conversations and activities where you're co-creating some of those expectations with the players. Um, as you were talking there, Mackenzie, I think about coaches that we've worked with and conversations I've had, in other contexts where we encourage coaches to pull back the veil a little bit, not just on what they're trying to accomplish this year, or as you said, the logistics of when is practice and bus times and things like that, but to reveal a little bit about themselves, and you referenced there sharing your values as a coach and some of your non-negotiables. And I love the way you frame that, like the way that I knew it had to work for me. And I wonder if
Yeah.
you could just share a couple of those things specifically, like what were maybe one or two of those values or non-negotiables that you really wanted to communicate with parents? Because I think sometimes coaches are a little bit afraid, to open themselves up that way, but especially as a first year coach, that takes some courage to be able to do.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of defined each of my values: joy, gratitude, connection, as far as, just giving them a little snippet of, gratitude, and define as the open door to abundance. And so like just giving them little snippets of that, and, how they can expect that to show up in my coaching and, in my communication. And, as far as non-negotiables, one thing for me is just communication. Like, you're dealing with 17, 18-year-olds. Sometimes they're coming from, off-campus classes or whatever. There's going to be, 5-10 minutes late, or, hey, I have to go to tutoring, or, my family's taking this vacation, I'm going to miss Friday, blah, blah, blah. I have to go visit my brother at college. So, and that doesn't really bother me as far as like attendance wise goes, but like we will not start practice until everyone who I expect to be there is there. And I will be like, where's this person? Where's this person? Where's this person? Somebody text them. Like, I just need to know. I don't know why. It will like throw off my whole day, and I'll be angry at that person if I don't know where you are. Like, if you're not going to be there to run the warm-up lap at 2:30, I need to know. And so that's just like one example of a non-negotiable. I think another one is just like a 24-hour rule as far as, frustrations and communications at about playing time or about mostly playing time. But anything else that's like, hey, unless it's, just casual, but anytime it's like a frustration or highly emotional subject, I just think a 24-hour rule is, what I need. And then on top of that, like a request to talk about something with a subject in mind, not just like, hey, Coach McKenzie, can I talk to you after practice? I'm like, okay, about what? Like, I want to be prepared for this meeting as well. I've walked into conversations where like I didn't realize it was going to be, this big conversation before, and I'm like totally unprepared for that meeting, that conversation. So those couple things I knew that I wanted to communicate with them really.
Yeah, and I love the specificity of that, because I think sometimes as coaches, we just assume that parents will know, like, don't come up to me right after a game or right after practice, or, what conversations we want to have or don't want to have, or what's appropriate or not appropriate. And it's much easier to start from the assumption that they're not sure, right? And part of my job as the coach is to communicate that clearly so everybody kind of understands their role, not just as players, which we'll get into in a second here, but also as parents. What's the job of the parent? How do they support the team, the coach, the program, the players? What's the job of the players, et cetera? So I love what you shared there. Now, you've made reference a couple times here to the Captain's Council, and that's obviously one of the core systems as part of the TOC approach here to building culture. Could you share just a little bit, first of all, just kind of how you selected captains, and then again, looking back at the season, maybe what was the most significant way that you used your captains to help you lead and coach the team?
Yeah. So going in, I knew that this was kind of going to be a kind of tough part of the season, as far as, we have a lot of like juniors on the team who are super skilled. We've had seniors on the team who've been on the team for a long time and who are kind of like expecting that captainship based on how things have gone in the past and how long they've been on the team. And I wasn't sure that, they were going to be seen in that way as the team. And so I decided to leave it up to the team and fully know, and maybe, and this was just the way I decided to do it this year. I feel like captain's councils, and how people select captains vary a ton. And so we had a meeting, we defined the role of a captain, all of the actual responsibilities. And then we defined the characteristics of a good leader. And we also incorporated, at that point, we had already had our team manifesto meeting. And we had incorporated those values that we defined as a team into our kind of like characteristics as well. And then I had everyone nominate 2 people. I already told them we were going to select 4. We had a team of 17 and we selected 4 captains. And everyone nominated 2 people. They were allowed to nominate themselves. I actually ended up with 10 nominations, and which 10 out of 17, I was like, okay, that's great, but that's like too many to vote on, in my opinion. And so that I ended up removing a few people that only had 1 nomination. So we ended up with, I think, 6 or 7 to vote on, and had the girls rank each person or give each person points based on what they were evaluating in that person, whether it was ability to fulfill this role or on this specific value. And yeah, we ended up with 2 seniors, 1 super talented, super like just really high level player, Division I commit, and she's our goalie. She's probably all-state goalie. And then another senior who's like not as experienced and talented, but just kind of like a heart type player, and super like caring and thoughtful. And I can see why people voted her in. And then 2 juniors, both really highly talented people. And then so there were 2 seniors left out of that, that had been on the team for 3 or 4 years. And I knew it was going to kind of be a heartbreak discussion to break it to them that their teammates did not vote them as captain. And, that prompted the first, phone call from a parent that was disappointed. A lot of the feedback that I got was that the girls really liked it. So maybe some changes there as far as communication goes for next year.
Well, and I think, to be fair, and JP could speak to this as well, that anytime you're implementing these systems, they are different than what 95% of coaches are doing,
Yeah.
or how they were coached when they played back in the day, right? And so, whether it's a parent or it's a player, or even sometimes coaches on your staff that have never chosen captains in this way. I've never done player development meetings to start a season. I've never had an intentional system to talk about playing time, right? And how are we going to negotiate that? That's all new and it's all different. And so I don't know that there's a perfect way, McKenzie, in your first year that you can communicate that clearly, just because no matter what, the experience is going to be different. I think it's when you have confidence in it and you understand, this is what I'm trying to get out of it, and the reasons why we're doing it this way. You're making a coherent argument at the beginning. And then hopefully, as you said, the feedback you got at the end of the year is that the players appreciated the system. And I think if it works that way, where players feel more supported, more represented, they feel like they have more of a voice, certainly parents will, eventually become supportive of that as well, because hopefully it enhances the culture. And so I just say that to give the coaches that are listening, like, it does take some courage, and not everybody's going to come out of that parent meeting and say, that's brilliant, I am totally 100% in agreement with that, right? And all the consequences that come with it, I'm totally okay with, like, that's not the real world. So I think you deserve some credit for just having the courage to try something different, in all of these different systems. So I want to transition here kind of to the next one that we talked about, and again, this is kind of an early season thing, which is the player development plans. Those early meetings with individual players, not just talking about their role. I think that's one place where, as I look back in my career, I probably could have been better about, looking at those early season conversations from a different lens, where I'm thinking, all right, this is my opportunity to present a logical argument about why this person should play, or the role that they're in, or maybe that they're not going to play, versus really more of an exploration of what are their goals, what are their ambitions, and how could I be more supportive of them in chasing those goals. So could you talk to us, I guess, a little bit about how you approach the player development plans? And one tool that I thought was really good for you to use, and I think help those conversations, was just the Google form ahead of time, so that, as you said before, you kind of know what to expect when you go into each one of those conversations. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was super excited to do this, just because last year I was just kind of a fly on the wall a lot of times, and getting to know a lot of the girls that I didn't know. I didn't know some of them, but the ones that I didn't, and then this year having a handful of new people move up from JV, people that I just really weren't familiar with, and so sending out that Google form, which just told me a little bit about them in general outside of field hockey, how many siblings do you have? What are your school, like, what are you like in school? Things to like just talk to them about that are outside of field hockey. Obviously, just connecting with them and letting them know I care about them, not on a, field hockey level. I knew that was going to be important. And then, asking them a little bit about what they thought their strengths and weaknesses were, from last year, or things that they just know about themselves as a player, what positions they see themselves playing, and kind of like how much time they feel like as of, early. Actually, I don't think I asked that super early in the season, and just in that first meeting. We didn't really talk about time or anything like that, but strengths, weaknesses, what they like field hockey wise, what they actually have questions about. One thing I included was like, field hockey is like somewhat new to a lot of people. A lot of JV players don't pick up a stick until their freshman year, and so they're still learning the game a lot. And like, what questions do you have about the game or about your position, or what skills do you think make up a really great player in your position that you may or may not have already? And so we just got to kind of talk through those things, and I got to answer a lot of their questions, which was good, and just like brought up more questions. And so some of those meetings like went off the rails, which is great. But that helped a lot, even in players that I thought like knew a ton more about the game, or about their position. I just got to like speak to the game, which obviously I love the game. And just like, okay, what makes a really great midfielder, and like, what do I need from you, and what do I feel like you are good at already, that can enhance your ability to play this position, or what kind of decisions you need to make on the field. And so those conversations were really fun for me, because I just got to talk about the game and where I thought that they might fit in this year to one of those kind of places.
When in those conversations, what was most important for you to be effective as a coach?
Yeah, I think like just learning about them, and then also selfishly like just sharing my love for it. And I think that the like kind of like opened up something in them. They're like, wow, like Coach McKenzie really loves this. Like, I want to love it too, or I want to I want to help fuel her love for it. I don't know. I felt that like energy, transfer between us, like in some of those meetings. Was just like really fun to like go back and forth and answer questions, and get to kind of like fuel that knowledge and foundation for it. But effectiveness is just like me listening to them talk about what they love in school, and what they feel like they're really strong at, or what they feel like they're not strong at, and challenge them on that, and be like, well, why don't you feel like you're super strong at that? Because I feel like you've made improvements there. Things like that, and just kind of just go back and forth.
So it's like a balance between, you want to bring your passion, your enthusiasm, your love of the sport and coaching it, and you also had to be a good listener. You had to just ask great questions, hold back, and not just share a lot.
Yeah. And I think it fuels them to like, obviously, chat about themselves. And at first they're like super uncomfortable about it. So I think talking about the game helps kind of like open the door a little bit, and just kind of like answering those like, oh, well, what is this call, and how does this work, blah blah blah, like opens the door a little bit to, well, like, all right, like, why don't you feel super good at that, or like, how can I help, what do you feel like? Also asked, I forgot about this, I also asked like how they feel like they learn best, or how they feel like they get when they make improvements, like what kind of coaching or what kind of instruction do you need in tough moments, or what do you need when you're like really just confused, because it happens to everyone. And I know from past coaching experiences, obviously, and every coach knows this, but like everyone's a little bit different. Some people want like really clear instruction on what they need to do, and they want to like stop what they're doing and fix it right there. Some people want to be told after the mistake or after the play. And some people, just want they already know, they just want like some encouragement there. And so like knowing that a little bit ahead of time really helps too. and then telling them like, okay, well, like, here's how I sometimes have to give it in terms of like for you to just get it, so I don't forget about it. I'm a person who's like, okay, I will sometimes tell you right in the moment whether you like it or not, whether that's best for you or not. And so just kind of like being like, I know this about you, but sometimes I can't give you that all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff there, and flowers to JP for like building out kind of the infrastructure for this. I think one of the other things that's so impactful about the Google form and the questions that are on there is that not only does it allow you to learn more about each of those players, especially in your first year, right? But it also prompts them to be a little bit more self-reflective. Most coaches will ask, what are your strengths? Maybe what are your weaknesses? Like, what do you need to work on? But like, there's a question on there that says, how do you potentially hurt the team? How do
Yeah.
you help the team? How do you potentially hurt the team? And that for a minute for a player is like, well, I guess my weakness actually, because I can't handle, pressure, or certain kind of defense or whatever it might be, like it starts to connect a little bit more with them. Um, just for their own awareness that you can coach them through. And I think that the whole goal of all of it is like, let's figure out where they are so they understand where they are, where they'd like to be, and then how can you support them in a way that allows them to grow, but also is going to benefit the team.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, related to this is the issue of playing time. And you mentioned how in those player development meetings, you may not have talked a lot about minutes. Those were real early in the season when those happened. And once you start making decisions about who's starting and lineups and the rotation, inevitably there are going to be issues that arise on any team in any sport, right? So when you started thinking a little bit more about the specific roles and how minutes were going to be distributed, were there any strategies that you felt were really useful for you in trying to, as JP said earlier, get upstream of some of the potential issues related to playing time?
Yeah, I think the one main thing that just not even just like a system, but just helped me kind of determine playing time and how I'm going to actually communicate this. Because I feel like, every coach can, in their head be like, all right, this player over this player and this player over this player. You know, you just get good at kind of figuring that out and deciding on your own. But it's like, how do you actually turn around and communicate that to a parent or a player who has questions or is just like looking for something to be like, how did you come to this decision? Right. And you have to be able to articulate that, which is hard. And especially when you coach girls, it's like, how do I articulate that I am actually comparing you guys? Because nobody wants to be compared. Nobody wants, to feel like, you're in this like competition with your friend. And that's like hard, I think, especially coaching girls, is like to communicate that I am comparing you guys on a daily basis. And I don't want to say that. Like, but that's the nature of, playing time. It's like this player is better in this specific situation. And so the main thing that I took away from the playing time system is like that 2 threshold system. Was just like, oh, this is like so good to help me just identify and communicate how I'm gonna actually say this. So like the first threshold is basics, academic eligibility, your attitude, your effort, and your attendance. So, if you miss X amount of practices this week, you're probably not going to start. You're probably not going to get, the minutes that you need if you missed, our walkthrough practice, but going over what formation we're going to play. And then secondly, performance. The second threshold is performance, your skills, and your development in that order. And then lastly, I added this like variables, which is, opponent, game importance, personnel, and strategy. So, we may be playing opponent where this person's going to get a lot more time, where this person's not going to get a whole lot of time. We're going to play, a game that we really need to win, that we need to win by X amount of goals because of goal differential. We're going to, put this player in, personnel. We're going to play a 4-back system. We're going to play, with one striker, that changes sometimes. And, same with game strategy. So just kind of having that outline helps me to figure out where does this player fit into those things? Are you not meeting the first threshold? Are you not really at the second threshold? And then, this variable is because.
Yeah. And one of the I remember talking about this.
Oops, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay on the lag on it. So I was trying to, anyways. All right. Work for the editor. There we go. All right. So McKenzie, what I'm hearing that you're doing in that playing time is you're really helping them to see how you come to decisions. At the same time, you've also done these one-on-ones where you've shown that you're investing in them and that their development matters. And I just I think that those are two critical things, right? One is you're making an investment in them irregardless of whether they play or not. Shows that they matter to you and hopefully to the team. And then on the other side is you're walking them through the very, very challenging part of making those playing time decisions. As you got throughout the year, when the playing time decisions were really difficult, maybe for you, what were the strategies that you were using to maybe address that, as you had to maybe make a change in rotation or things like that?
I think I just was straightforward with a player. It was probably after a game or at the next practice where I would address them and be hey, come here, come talk to me. So obviously you weren't a huge part of, the minutes last night. And, tell me how you feel about that. And, it's super uncomfortable to address that player who may not even really know what, obviously they know, obviously they're, maybe they're upset or maybe they don't care that much, but it's either it's going to go I, wasn't having a great game, or I haven't felt super great about practice or whatever. And you can kind of just talk it through with them and, you can tell them what your intention was. I think one conversation I had was hey, I was fully intent on getting you more minutes in that game last night, but it just didn't go that way. And, I have a hard time apologizing because I can't be sorry. But I was I can't make any promises going forward. So it's how do you fuel that conversation and how do you go through that conversation? But I think the important part is just kind of bringing it to their attention that it's not an elephant in the room, and they don't have to wonder why or wonder, if Coach McKenzie even noticed that she didn't put me in the game last night when we were up by 5 goals. And so as far as, having those uncomfortable conversations, you just kind of do it and figure it out. That's kind of my strategy. It wasn't much of a strategy this year, but just kind of pull that player aside and be hey, and I'm just telling you that I noticed, and I'm not forgetting about you.
Yeah. And I think this is huge. And this is why I really wanted to highlight this, because you're being direct, you're having the conversation, you are empathetic. I see you. You're not saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you didn't play last night. You're just saying, I see you. I see this is tough. I just wanted to highlight that. I think that's just a phenomenal way that you handled that, is you had to have those courageous conversations with empathy, but you weren't apologetic because you're doing what you think is best for the team.
Yeah. It's it's hard to go back and forth in those conversations because I don't apologize. makes it hard to kind of like end it. You want to be like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't play you last night, but you can't say I'm sorry because I have a good reason, and I probably would do the same thing if we were back in that situation. But we can go forward. Here's what I need from you this week. And coming up, we play this team. And so, if you show me what you need to show me in practice this week, we can, hopefully the game presents itself. We can get you in there.
And I think it's probably important to note here that we're not saying that coaches should never apologize. I mean, I can
Right.
think of examples where I looked down on the bench. I remember one year didn't get a kid into the game because she'd taken her warm-up off at halftime, when they were shooting, and didn't put it back on. And so I just grabbed the kids that still had their warm-up on, thinking that everyone who had their warm-up off had already gotten in the game, and she didn't get in the game in this blowout. And one of the captains said to me later, like, hey, did you know you didn't get this, our teammate into the game? And I was like, I didn't even realize it. And I went back and watched the film and went right by her as I'm unloading the bench. So of course, the next day I go to her and I'm like, that was totally my fault. That was something that I would have done differently if I would have noticed it at the time. And I think that's probably the distinction there, is if you would have done something different, not based on the outcome necessarily, but just based on something that you didn't see, then for sure own it, because I do think that's an investment in the relationship too. But at the same time, if you're trying to win the game and, you're making the best decisions, as JP said, for the team, you don't necessarily have to apologize for that, even if it doesn't go the way that you thought it might going into the game. And I think one thing, I was going to bring this up a little bit earlier, JP, that is really good out of the playing time system that I had not really thought about it even until talking with McKenzie through it this year, is that articulating, she talked about making the decision isn't necessarily the hard part. The hard part is communicating the decision, right? And how you're going to make those decisions with players and parents. And there's a great slide in the TOC resources about different approaches to playing time. Like, there's the idea that there are games we have to play to win, and that determines a rotation. But there's other games where that might be more of a developmental game, where there's more, either because of the score or because of the opponent, where the goal in this game is going to be to use the minutes to develop a team or, a lineup or particular individuals, to give them some experience. And that's different. And that can change game to game. It can change, based on where you're at in the season, conference versus non-conference, or postseason, whatever it might be. And I thought that was just a great framework. I know we talked about that a little bit, McKenzie, to be able to communicate. Like, it's a great tool to really help people think, oh, so just because you played so-and-so on Tuesday doesn't mean that the same thing will happen on Friday because the opponents are different in the strategy or whatever. So I thought that was a really good framework to be able to draw from as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just would add on that too, what you're trying to do through this, and what I think McKenzie was able to achieve, which is there's a level of conviction in the principles and the process. Here's my process. I've put a lot of thought into this. All of a sudden you lay this out and players are going, oh, coach thinks about this a lot. It's like the case studies activity that we do. That's in the course. It's just like, you give a bunch of players a bunch of different scenarios where the coach has to make decisions, and you go, now you make the decision. They're like, oh, this is hard, right? This is really hard. But by walking them through the process, you're going, okay, coach gives this obviously a lot more thought than I do, right? in most cases. And just walking through that, you're able to speak with potentially more conviction on this and make those decisions. But I think there always, and I sense this in McKenzie, there needs to be a level of like uncertainty. Like, I'm doing the best I can with the information I have. I'm not going to always get it right. To your point about apologizing, and not say you have to make a decision and go apologize. Well, I should have played so-and-so today because you clearly stunk it up over there. I'm saying more so of like, I'm not going to always get it right, but this is my intentional process. And I think that's a huge component of it too, that I sense in McKenzie.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too, is just kind of like, if I feel some type of way about a situation that happened with the playing time, or, even like with the captains thing, it's just like getting ahead of it. If I feel some type of way about it, the player or the parent is going to feel the same, and probably at a higher degree. And so jumping in front of that and addressing it first so that it doesn't become bigger was probably a big help in terms, because I haven't always done that. And I think that, being brave and addressing that player first probably negates a ton of things, instead of just being like, oh, well, maybe they'll forget about it, or maybe their parent won't reach out to talk about it. But yeah, just having that, weird conversation of just being like, hey, this is what happened. I'm not noticing this.
Well, and that kind of brings us to the last real intentional strategy that we kind of talked through during the season here, which was having intentional one-on-one meetings. We've talked about the first one here in the player development plan. I know you did a couple other check-ins throughout the season, and maybe you could talk a little bit about, just quickly, kind of how often you did those, but then what you see now looking back at the season was the benefit of intentionally setting aside some time to check in with every player as the season was going along.
Yeah, well, first looking back, I would definitely, for next year, I'm gonna set aside more time to do it. Like I might cancel a practice so that I can, meet with people instead. Because it just becomes really hard throughout the season. And, we have 2 games a week, and, we're doing film, and, nobody wants to stay after practice on a Saturday and, wait 30 minutes for their time slot. And so I'll set aside more time next year to do it, because it just becomes hard. So I understand why people feel like that's a mountain to climb in terms of scheduling that in. And that would be my recommendation, is to schedule that in, because so I did, the first meeting, kind of we already talked about those. And then a second meeting kind of after the first few games, where we were we had lost our first 2 games, and then we started winning some, but I had made some significant changes in terms of the lineup and positional and, all that stuff. And so just kind of those meetings became more check-ins with the people who things had changed for, mostly, and just talking with them about it. And is this kind of hey, this is what has happened. How are we feeling? Where, let's go back and see kind of where positionally you may now fit in, and what roles, what skills, and what things you can do to get more time in that position. And so it's just a review, a revision, I guess, of the first meeting. And then I think that then at the end of the season, we checked in with, I really checked in with a lot of spent more time checking in with my leadership council towards the end of the season, just on where we are, how are we feeling, what's going on. It's really important for me to know what's going on with school, is it midterms week, what can we handle, do we just need a fun practice this week, we have time, what does the team need. And so yeah, I would definitely make more time next year to do more individual check-ins, but I kind of went on a as needed basis for most of the people who were needed those check-ins, and then just shorter check-ins after practice or right before practice, or getting on the bus, or as people are journaling it in film sessions, just in those little moments, hey, how's everything going? How's school? How are you feeling? What do you need? How's your body? Those kind of check-ins that were shorter throughout the season. But I intended at the beginning of the season to do one big one at the beginning, one big one in the middle, one big one at the end. I would give myself a B-.
Well, for a first-year head coach at a high school program that doesn't even work in the building as a teacher,
yeah,
I give you an A. A-. We'll give it an A-. But I think you nailed one on the head there, which is you could have the captains, the leadership group, or your assistants run the practice, and just sit down and do, plow through some one-on-ones there. I think too, in a field hockey season, the season was very short. And let's not forget that you did take a honeymoon in the middle of the season
I
too.
did. I did. Yeah,
So I
not
mean, yeah,
typical.
but at the end of the day, we most seasons we go, geez, I could have done more one-on-ones. I don't think there's any coach that once you start doing them goes, this is a waste of time. It's just the investment is huge on the other end. One thing I want to note is just you started to do more. Probably something I would have emphasized years ago is like you got to do your weekly leadership council meeting. Get it in, get it in, get it in. Probably now I'm more about like daily check-ins or as quick check-in as frequently as you can. And I love how you were just saying here, you're having those conversations. What's the pulse? What are we feeling today? Like it almost, especially for someone that's not in the building or, deeply ingrained in the day-to-day life of their players, they become uh, the thermometer and potentially the thermostat, within your team, and you're constantly checking with them and helping them to adjust. So love that bit as well.
Yeah. One thing I think too that I need to lean on more next year and that like helped a lot, but I didn't utilize it enough was my assistants. And getting them to check in, well, one main assistant, getting her to like help check in on certain players that may be easier to check in with. Even though it's like, oh, I'm assuming that person would be easier to check in with, but hey, report back to me if there's anything like notable that person is, feeling, I'm feeling stressed about school, or I don't know, I'm having a bad week of practice, blah, blah, blah. But just leaning on them a little bit more, I think too, because my assistant is really good at that, where I'm not super, always asking about how things are going. She's pretty good at that too. So lean on them.
Well, McKenzie, as we mentioned in the intro here, you did have a bit of a Hollywood ending in winning a state championship, and we had a couple conversations as the postseason, approached at the end of the year. Taking a team that was a quarterfinalist the year before, but obviously had ambition to get past that round and continue this year. You're in your first year, kind of leading into that postseason situation. Was there anything that you felt like was really effective for your team when it came to preparing for that win or go home time of year?
Yeah, we had a meeting before. It was after our very first playoff game, but before our game started, getting significantly more difficult. And all I wanted to do was to just chat about how and Nate gave me this, these kind of prompts for the girls, but like, how does it feel different? Even though it's the same game, it's the same team, it's the same everything, but it's different. And I just wanted us to have the edge of like addressing those feelings and emotions and craziness that happens, so that we're not surprised by it and we don't feel, stressed in those moments. And because I'd already seen them do a really good job balancing, composure and urgency. And I didn't want that to not be the case when things started to ramp up. And I told them that. I was like, my intention in this meeting is just the first half of this meeting today is just to talk about this so that we're not surprised by how our teammates feel or how we feel. And I'm not expecting you to like those feelings to be lower or higher because we've talked about it, but just that it doesn't surprise you. And, I gave them, again, something that Nate said. It was just like, these feelings are just your body's way of telling you that, this thing really matters and that you really care about it and that you're really excited and you want to do well. And so that kind of, brought some peace of mind to them. I think that it's like, hey, we're expecting all of this. We're expecting all of these feelings and we're expecting it to be hard and expecting to go in and have to fight and have a tough game. But we're also expecting, to be able to play and to be able to fight and be able to stay composed. And so that we have this edge, we're going to at least talk about it.
Yeah, I think that was important for our team, and I know we've shared this in the past when we had a conversation with Alex Auerbach a while back here this year. But the idea that those feelings and butterflies and the nervousness and, well, what if we lose? And not only does it reveal that, yeah, this thing is important to you and your body's just responding to that, but it's earned. Like, you've earned the right to feel this way, and there's so many other teams in the state that are at home watching this game on the live stream that would kill to be out on the field one more time and feel what you're feeling, right? And so now all of a sudden it doesn't become a threat, or it doesn't become something to avoid or something to try to bury. It's like, this is part of the landscape. This is where we want it to be. This is how I want to feel because we're in a big game. And that just, I think, completely changes the mindset when it comes to those nerves. All of a sudden they become something that's healthy and normal and expected, as you said, rather than something that you try to fight against.
Yeah, we talked about a couple meetings before that. We talked about teammates and how different people need different things before the game, and how to get to your hype number before the game, and tools to get there. And that kind of just brought to light, like, okay, like, I don't have to be like going crazy before the game to be at my best. That's actually not what's best for me. And I don't need to hang out with somebody who's, going crazy before the game, because I'm going to get too ramped up. And so I just think I put a lot of, we did a mental training program throughout the season, with another, she was also on the podcast a little while ago, Bree from the elite competitor. So I did her program, which was awesome for the girls throughout the season too. They really enjoyed that, and just like checking in and talking about those things, I think definitely gave us an edge as far as, not just team bonding, but just the girls learning about themselves, which I think is just so important for women's sports. That's definitely one thing that I got a lot out of my college experience, is just I learned so much about myself and my body and my mentality. So I wanted to give them pieces of that as well.
So just a few things that really resonate with me about McKenzie in year one. The first is just how important laying the foundation is in the first 30 days. McKenzie got upstream of so many issues. The flywheel was moving with her culture. And so that probably saved her a lot of frustrations and heartache, and kept the culture in a solid place. For a first-year head coach, though, I think it's just incredible how someone, first-year head coach, the varsity level, in her 20s, she had incredible conviction around the principles and strategies. I know for sure that I had nowhere near that level of clear communication and conviction around parents and my players, even in my 30s as a coach. So it's a testament, really. It really just shows you what happens when you put in the work, like McKenzie has done, through obviously listening to the podcast, going through the online certification course, being just in this framework day in and day out over the last 2 years, obviously has really helped her to be successful in this first year of coaching. It also just says a lot about her as a person and as a human being, which at the end of the day is something we're going to talk a little bit more about in next episode, which is just so critical for us as coaches, right? We can come up with things like core values, but do we actually live in alignment with those values? And we'll be talking about that more in our next episode with McKenzie. One other thing here before we let you go. The incredible thing here is not only can you prepare and learn like McKenzie, you can do it alongside her, myself, Nate, and so many other coaches that want to be transformational, that want to build incredible team cultures. You can do that at TOC Coach, our online platform that you can go through our coach certification program, our other online courses around parents. You can access resources for culture building, a supportive community, and you get coaching, right? You get coaching through our live training and a free one-to-one coaching call when you sign up for our premium access. To learn more, head on over to tocculture.com or use the link in the details of this episode. As always, if you want to support the podcast, please leave us a lovely review, share the episode, and be sure to subscribe.